In the darkest depths of Slavic forests, where ancient trees whisper forgotten names, stands a hut on chicken legs. Its owner is neither alive nor dead, neither kind nor cruel, but something far more terrifying. She is ambiguous. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, flames rise into the night sky. Women scream as fire consumes their flesh, accused of consorting with devils, brewing storms in cauldrons, and cursing their neighbors with evil eyes. The crowd watches, satisfied that evil is being purged. These are two faces of the same ancient fear. Two paths diverging from a single source, the primordial terror of feminine power that exists beyond male control. In Slavic lands, this fear crystallized into Baba Yaga, the witch who guards the boundary between life and death. In Western Europe, it became the witch hunts, where real women died for imaginary crimes. But here lies the profound mystery. Why did one culture preserve this archetype as a complex mythological figure, while another turned it into a weapon of mass persecution? Why does Baba Yaga still offer both death and wisdom to heroes, while European witches were stripped of all ambiguity, transformed into pure evil? Tonight, we descend into this ancient dichotomy. We'll walk through forests where skulls glow with supernatural light, and enter courtrooms where torture extracts impossible confessions. We'll trace the footsteps of wise women who once stood at the crossroads of worlds, healing and harming, birthing and burying, before history split them into fairy tale and funeral pyre. This is not just a story about witches. It's about how societies choose their monsters and what those choices reveal about their deepest fears. It's about power, gender, and the dangerous wisdom that comes from standing at the edge of civilization, looking into the wild darkness beyond. The chicken legs begin to turn. The pyre is lit. Our journey into forbidden power begins now. If you're ready to look beyond the veil of forgotten myths and uncover the secrets the world chose to forget, subscribe to Inside Strange Times so you won't miss new journeys into the realm of ancient mysteries. Before there was Baba Yaga, before European women burned as witches, there was an older figure. She appears in every culture that has ever existed, wearing different masks but serving the same essential function. She is the woman who stands at the boundary between the village and the wilderness, between the living and the dead, between the known and the unknowable. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric Europe reveals something profound. Female figurines dating back 30,000 years, often found near burial sites, suggest women held special roles in death rituals. The Venus of Willendorf, the Venus of Dolny Viestinus, these weren't just fertility symbols. They were found with red ochre, the color of blood and transformation, placed carefully in graves. In Çatalhöyük, one of the world's oldest settlements, archaeologists discovered something remarkable. Beneath sleeping platforms where families rested lay the bones of ancestors. And who presided over these burial rituals? Female figurines, seated on thrones flanked by leopards or vultures, animals associated with death and rebirth. These weren't goddesses of harvest or love. They were mistresses of the threshold, guardians of the dangerous passage between worlds. The pattern repeats across continents and millennia. In ancient Sumerian texts, we find Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, who judges the dead and controls their fate. She is neither good nor evil, but necessary. Her sister Inanna must strip naked and die to enter her realm and gain wisdom. Already we see the motif. Wisdom comes through encountering the terrible feminine who guards the gates of transformation. The Greeks knew her as Hecate, goddess of crossroads and magic. She carried torches through the night, accompanied by howling dogs, and taught mortals the secrets of herbs and poisons. Medea, her most famous priestess, could rejuvenate the old by boiling them with magical herbs, but also murdered her own children in revenge. The boundary woman gives life and takes it, without moral judgment, only necessity. But these mythological figures had real-world counterparts. Every traditional society needed women who understood the mysteries of birth and death. The midwife who knew which herbs could ease labor or end an unwanted pregnancy. The herbalist who gathered plants by moonlight, understanding that some medicines work only when harvested at specific times. The layer out of the dead, who washed corpses and prepared them for burial, ensuring the spirit wouldn't return to trouble the living. These women possessed dangerous knowledge. They knew which mushrooms brought visions and which brought death. They could cure impotence or cause it. They understood the female body's mysteries, its cycles of blood and milk, fertility and barrenness. Men needed them but feared them, for their knowledge came from sources beyond male control. Roman historian Tacitus, writing about Germanic tribes, described women called völvas. These seeresses traveled from settlement to settlement, sitting on high platforms, entering trances to answer questions about the future. Even warriors consulted them before battle. The saga of Eric the Red describes one such woman, Thorbjorg Little Volva, who wore a blue cloak lined with cat fur and gloves made from cat skin. She carried a staff topped with brass and a pouch containing her magical tools. When Thorbjorg arrived at a farmstead during famine, she was treated like royalty. They prepared a high seat for her, stuffed with hen feathers. They served her a meal of the hearts of every animal available, for she needed their life force to see clearly. Young women sang ancient songs to summon spirits, while Thorbjorg entered her trance. When she emerged, she prophesied the famine's end and told each person their fate. Notice the details. The high seat elevates her above ordinary humans. The animal hearts connect her to non-human consciousness. The cat fur links her to creatures that move between domestic and wild spaces. Every element reinforces her liminal status, neither fully human nor spirit, neither completely civilized nor entirely wild. Anthropologists studying Siberian shamanism found striking parallels to European witch beliefs. Among the Yakut people, the most powerful shamans were often women, called Udagan. They could transform into animals, fly through the air, and travel to the land of the dead. Sound familiar? These female shamans underwent terrible initiations. They experienced symbolic death and dismemberment, their bones counted and reassembled by spirits. They emerged transformed, able to see what others couldn't, heal what others couldn't touch. But this power came with a price. They lived apart from normal society, marked as different, dangerous, necessary but never fully trusted. The connection between shamanism and European witchcraft isn't speculation. Carlo Ginzburg's research on the Benandanti of northern Italy reveals actual shamanic practices surviving into the Renaissance. These good walkers claim to leave their bodies at night, traveling in spirit form to battle evil witches, ensuring good harvests. They were born with the caul, the amniotic membrane covering their face, marking them as belonging partially to the other world. When the Inquisition arrived, they couldn't understand this complexity. The Benandanti insisted they fought witches, not that they were witches. But the church forced them into its simple binary. You either served God or the devil. There was no room for ambiguous figures who might serve neither, or both. The archetype consistently appears in triple form: maiden, mother, crone. The three fates who spin, measure, and cut the thread of life. The three Norns beneath the world tree, determining destiny. This isn't coincidence. It reflects the three stages of female reproductive life and the three types of knowledge each stage brings. The maiden knows the power of potential, of sexuality not yet realized. She is the Virgin Mary, but also Persephone, pure but on the threshold of transformation. The mother knows creation and nurture, but also the savage protection of her young. She is Demeter searching for her daughter, willing to starve the world in her grief. The crone knows endings, the wisdom that comes after fertility fades. She has nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing left to fear. It's the crone who becomes the witch. Post-menopausal women in traditional societies held unique positions, free from pregnancy's dangers and child-rearing's demands. They could focus on specialized knowledge. They became the keepers of stories, the rememberers of remedies, the ones who prepared the dead. Medieval medical texts reveal fascinating details. The Trotula, a compilation of women's medicine from Salerno, describes treatments passed down through generations of women. Remedies for promoting conception, easing childbirth, treating women's secrets. This knowledge was oral, experiential, transmitted from old woman to young outside official channels. But knowledge is power, and unofficial power threatens official authority. The Church Father Tertullian wrote, "Woman is the devil's gateway." Saint Jerome warned that women's speech was poison. By the 13th century, Thomas Aquinas argued women were naturally inferior, more susceptible to demonic influence. The stage was being set for transforming wise women into witches. The most consistent aspect of the witch archetype is her relationship with death. She doesn't just predict it or cause it. She facilitates the transition, guides souls across the boundary. This is why witches fly. Flight represents the soul's journey after death, the shaman's spirit travel, the movement between worlds. In Wales, the sign eater was often an old woman who absorbed the dying person's sins by eating bread and salt placed on the corpse. She took spiritual pollution into herself, allowing the soul to travel freely. Society needed her service but shunned her presence, for she carried the accumulated sins of the community. Irish keening women performed ritual lamentations at funerals. Their wild cries and torn hair weren't just expressions of grief. They were performing a spiritual function, helping the soul separate from the living, preventing it from lingering as a hungry ghost. The church tried to ban keening, seeing it as pagan and excessive. But people knew, without proper keening, the dead wouldn't rest. These death-working women possessed practical knowledge too. They knew how long a body could be kept before burial, how to wash and wrap it properly, what herbs would mask the smell of decay. They could tell if someone was truly dead or merely in a deep coma. In an age before medical certification, this knowledge literally meant the difference between burial and burning. The witch's cauldron appears everywhere, from Celtic mythology to Shakespeare. But it's not originally an instrument of evil. It's a symbol of transformation, the womb that births, the pot that nourishes, the vessel that breaks down and reconstructs. In Welsh mythology, the goddess Ceridwen brews a potion of wisdom in her cauldron for a year and a day. 3 drops accidentally fall on the thumb of her servant boy Gwion. He gains all knowledge instantly, but must flee her rage. They shapeshift through multiple forms: grain and hen, hare and hound, fish and otter. Finally, Ceridwen swallows him as a grain of wheat and births him 9 months later as the greatest bard, Taliesin. This is the cauldron's true nature. It breaks down the old form completely, reducing it to prima materia, then reconstitutes it as something new. The witch, stirring her pot, isn't just cooking. She's participating in the fundamental process of creation, dissolution, and renewal. Medieval alchemists understood this. They called their vessel the philosophical egg, or the hermetic vase. Inside it, base metal died and was reborn as gold. The process required the union of opposites, masculine sulfur and feminine mercury, sun and moon, death and birth. Many alchemical texts describe this work as women's work, comparing it to gestation in the womb. Deep in the Russian forest, where no paths lead, stands the most unusual dwelling in all folklore. A hut perched on massive chicken legs, constantly turning, its door facing away from visitors. To enter, you must know the proper words. Turn your back to the forest, your front to me. Only then will the hut lower itself and reveal its threshold. But why chicken legs? Folklorist Vladimir Prop discovered the answer in ancient Slavic burial practices. The dead were placed in small huts built on tall stumps to prevent animals from disturbing the corpses. These stumps, darkened and weathered, looked remarkably like bird legs. The chicken legs are actually funeral pillars, and Baba Yaga's hut is a house of the dead. This changes everything about how we understand her. She's not living in a whimsical fairy tale house. She dwells in a tomb, at the exact boundary between life and death. Heroes don't stumble upon her accidentally. They seek her out when they need to cross, from the world of the living into the realm of the dead. The hero Vasilisa the Beautiful doesn't find Baba Yaga while picking berries. She's sent there by her stepmother to fetch fire. But this isn't ordinary fire. It's the fire of the other world, the light that illuminates truth and burns away illusion. Vasilisa must enter the death realm to obtain the power to transform her life. The hut itself is alive, or perhaps undead. It responds to ritual words, recognizes visitors, decides whom to admit. Inside, it's larger than outside, defying physical laws. Sometimes it contains a bathhouse where Baba Yaga steams her visitors, preparing them like corpses for burial. Sometimes it holds a loom where she weaves human fate. Baba Yaga herself defies simple description. She's called Bone Leg, with one leg of solid bone, clicking against the floor as she walks. Her iron teeth can grind through anything, including human bones. Her breasts are so long, she throws them over her shoulders or hangs them on hooks. She's simultaneously ancient and ageless, hideous and powerful, filling her entire hut when lying down. But these aren't random grotesque details. The bone leg connects her to the skeletal realm, marking her as partially dead. The iron teeth associate her with the mineral kingdom, the underworld of metals and stones. The pendulous breasts, dried and useless, show she's beyond reproductive femininity, yet still fundamentally female. She travels in a mortar, steering with a pestle, sweeping away her tracks with a birch broom. The mortar and pestle are tools of transformation, grinding grain into flour, herbs into medicine, reducing solid matter to powder. She literally rides in an instrument of pulverization, breaking down whatever she encounters to its essential components. Her fence is built from human bones, topped with skulls whose eye sockets glow at night. The gate hinges are human leg bones. The lock is a jaw with sharp teeth. This isn't mere horror decoration. It's a clear message. Beyond this boundary lies death. Enter at your peril, and only if you're prepared for complete transformation. When heroes arrive at her hut, Baba Yaga always asks the same question. Are you here of your own will, or were you sent? This isn't small talk. It's a crucial test. Those who come by compulsion, driven by external forces, often end up in her oven. Those who choose their fate, who consciously seek transformation, might receive her help. She has a famous greeting, "Foo, foo," I smell Russian blood. But the proper hero knows how to respond. First feed me, give me drink, prepare the bathhouse, then ask your questions. This isn't rudeness. It's ritual protocol. The hero demands the rights of a guest, establishing a sacred relationship that even Baba Yaga must honor. Once the protocol is satisfied, she becomes remarkably helpful. She gives Prince Ivan a magical horse to reach the thrice ninth kingdom. She provides Vasilisa with a skull lamp whose fire destroys her tormentors. She offers specific directions to find the water of life or the apples of youth, but her help always comes with conditions. Sometimes heroes must complete impossible tasks. Sort a mixture of poppy seeds and dirt before dawn. Build a bridge of pine needles. Wash every dish in her hut, including the ones that multiply endlessly. These aren't arbitrary tortures. They're initiation tests, proving the hero can handle paradox, impossibility, and transformation. Scholars tracing Baba Yaga's origins find something unexpected. She's not a degraded demon, but a diminished goddess. Her name might derive from the Slavic word Baba, meaning grandmother or old woman, and Yaga possibly from the Proto-Slavic for disease or horror. But older interpretations suggest she's connected to the ancient mother goddess who ruled over life and death. In some regions, she's called Baba Yaga Kastianaya Noga, literally grandmother Yaga bone leg. The bone leg links her to Kostroma, a death goddess in Slavic mythology, whose ritual involved burning or drowning in effigy to ensure good harvest. Death feeding life, the old making way for the new. She has sisters, or perhaps they're all the same being. Sometimes there are 3 Baba Yagas living in identical huts, each one sending the hero to the next. This triple nature echoes the 3 fates, the 3 Norns, the universal pattern of feminine power, controlling destiny. Russian folklorist Alexander Afanasyev collected hundreds of Baba Yaga tales in the 19th century. He noticed she's never simply evil. In one tale, she eats children. In another, she saves them. She curses with one hand, blesses with the other. This isn't inconsistency. It's the fundamental nature of the death and rebirth goddess, who gives and takes without moral judgment. Baba Yaga's oven deserves special attention. She's constantly trying to cook and eat visitors, particularly children. But this oven isn't just for cannibalism. It's an initiation chamber, a womb of transformation. In the tale of Ivashka, a clever boy tricks Baba Yaga's daughter into entering the oven instead of him. He demonstrates superior knowledge of the transformation process. In another tale, she cooks the hero Teroshka, but he emerges stronger, having survived the fire ordeal. This echoes ancient initiation practices. Many cultures subjected adolescents to symbolic death and rebirth. They were cooked in sweat lodges, devoured by monster masks, digested in dark caves. They emerged as adults, having died to childhood. Baba Yaga's oven is this primordial initiation chamber where the raw becomes cooked, nature becomes culture, child becomes adult. The bathhouse serves a similar function. She always insists on bathing visitors before helping them. But this isn't about hygiene. In Slavic funeral customs, corpses were washed and steamed, preparing them for the afterlife. When Baba Yaga bathes you, she's preparing you for death, or rather, for the journey through death to reach your goal. Baba Yaga doesn't work alone. She commands mysterious servants who maintain the boundary between worlds. 3 riders pass her hut daily. The white rider is bright dawn, the red rider is red sun, the black rider is dark night. She calls them my day, my sun, pass my night. Time itself serves her. She has invisible servants who appear only as pairs of hands. They grind her grain, press her oil, cook her meals. When Vasilisa asks about them, Baba Yaga warns, not every question leads to good. Too much knowledge ages you quickly. Some mysteries aren't meant for mortal understanding. Her gates open and close by themselves. Her trees attack intruders. The skulls on her fence serve as supernatural guardians, their hollow eyes seeing everything. She doesn't need to chase heroes herself. The very landscape obeys her will, because she is the landscape, the living embodiment of the wild forest and its ancient powers. The story of Vasilisa the Beautiful provides the most complete picture of Baba Yaga's true function. Vasilisa's mother dies, leaving her a magical doll, and this instruction: feed the doll when you're in trouble, and she will help you. The doll represents ancestral wisdom, the mother's spirit guiding from beyond. When Vasilisa's stepfamily sends her to Baba Yaga for fire, they expect her to die. But Vasilisa has her mother's blessing, and more importantly, she knows how to navigate the death realm. At Baba Yaga's hut, Vasilisa must complete impossible tasks. Separate poppy seeds from dirt, sort millet from sand, all in one night. The doll helps her, but Vasilisa must feed it first. She must maintain the connection to ancestral wisdom, nurture it with offerings. Baba Yaga knows about the doll, but pretends ignorance. She's testing whether Vasilisa will maintain the sacred relationship even under pressure. When Vasilisa succeeds, Baba Yaga gives her a skull with burning coal eyes. This skull lamp is pure death fire, the light of truth that destroys lies. When Vasilisa returns home, the skull's gaze burns her stepfamily to ashes. But Vasilisa herself is unharmed. She's been through death's realm, received its power, and returned transformed. She's no longer a helpless girl, but a woman of power. Baba Yaga never appears in villages or cultivated lands. She exists only in the deep forest, the primordial wilderness, untouched by human civilization. This forest isn't just her home. It's her body, her manifestation, her sacred domain. In Slavic cosmology, the forest was the other world. Beyond the village's wooden fence lay chaos, mystery, transformation. The forest provided mushrooms, berries, game, medicines. But it also harbored wolves, bears, and spirits of the dead. Professional forest workers, hunters, and herbalists knew specific protocols for entering safely. They left offerings at certain trees. I spoke ritual greetings, avoided forbidden paths. They understood the forest as a living entity with its own consciousness and rules. Baba Yaga embodies this forest consciousness. She is its voice, its will, its terrible wisdom. When heroes seek her, they're not just visiting a witch. They're confronting the wild itself, the untamed feminine principle that exists beyond patriarchal control. Unlike her European counterparts, Baba Yaga was never fully demonized. The Orthodox Church tried, calling her a devil's grandmother, warning against her tales. But she remained stubbornly ambiguous, helping heroes as often as harming them. Why did she survive? When European wise women burned. First, Slavic Christianity developed differently from Western Catholicism. It incorporated more pagan elements, creating double faith, dvovery. Christian saints took on pagan attributes. Paraskeva Friday absorbed the goddess Mokosh. Saint Vlasios became protector of cattle, like the god Velis. There was more room for ambiguous figures. Second, Baba Yaga remained mythological. Nobody accused real women of being Baba Yaga. She stayed in stories, a necessary narrative function, rather than becoming a legal category. You might fear meeting her in the forest, but you wouldn't burn your neighbor for supposedly being her. Third, Russian serfdom created different social dynamics. The village commune, the mir, handled most local disputes. There was less incentive to use witchcraft accusations as tools of property redistribution. The economic motivations that drove European witch hunts didn't exist in the same form. Finally, Baba Yaga served essential psychological functions. She was the stern teacher who prepared heroes for adulthood, the terrible mother who forced children to become independent, the death goddess who made mortality comprehensible. Stories need such figures. To lose her, it would impoverish the imagination. Vladimir Prop's morphological analysis revealed Baba Yaga's structural function. She appears at the story's crucial turning point when the hero must transition from the familiar world to the magical realm. She's literally the threshold guardian, testing worthiness, providing tools, enabling transformation. Maria Gimbutas saw her as a survival of the prehistoric death goddess. The bird legs connect her to the bird goddess figurines found throughout Old Europe. The skulls and bones reflect Neolithic burial practices, where bones were cleaned and displayed. Andreas Johns's extensive study cataloged her appearances across hundreds of tales. He found remarkable consistency. She always appears alone, always in the forest, always at moments of crisis. She never enters human society. Humans must seek her out. She exists outside normal time and space, in the eternal now of mythic reality. Joanna Hubbs traced her connection to matrilineal traditions, the magical gifts passed from mother to daughter, like Vasilisa's doll, represent matrilineal wisdom traditions. Baba Yaga tests whether heroes maintain proper relationships with ancestral feminine power. While Baba Yaga danced between helping and harming in Slavic forests, something darker was happening in Western Europe. The same archetype of the boundary woman, the keeper of herbal knowledge, the mediator between life and death, was being systematically transformed, not into a complex mythological figure, but into a legal category for persecution. The transformation didn't happen overnight. In the early medieval period, the Church's position on witchcraft was skeptical. The Canon Episcopi, a church document from the 10th century, declared that believing in witches' ability to fly was itself heretical. Such beliefs were false and fantastic, planted by the devil to mislead the faithful. But by the 13th century, everything changed. Thomas Aquinas argued that demons were real and could grant powers to humans through explicit pacts. The Cathars and other heretical movements had shaken church authority. The Black Death killed a third of Europe, creating social chaos and scapegoat hunger. The Little Ice Age brought crop failures, livestock deaths, and starving populations looking for someone to blame. The wise woman at the edge of the village suddenly looked very suspicious. She knew which herbs could kill or cure. She delivered babies, and some of those babies died. She treated cattle diseases, and when treatment failed, was it incompetence or malice? The same knowledge that made her necessary now made her dangerous. In 1487, two Dominican inquisitors, Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger, published the most influential book in the history of persecution, the Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of Witches, became the manual for witch hunters, reprinted 14 times before 1520. The book is systematic in its misogyny. It explains why women are more susceptible to witchcraft. All wickedness is but little to the wickedness of a woman. Women are naturally weaker, more carnal, more vindictive, less rational than men. The very word femina, the authors claim falsely, comes from feminis, meaning less faith. The Malleus describes witches' abilities in detail. They cause impotence, steal penises, kill infants in the womb. They transform into animals, fly through the air, create storms. They have sexual intercourse with demons, producing a cold sensation because demonic seed lacks vital heat. But most importantly, the book provides legal procedures. How to identify witches through devil's marks or inability to cry. How to extract confessions through escalating torture. How to use testimony from children and criminals, normally inadmissible in court. How to promise mercy, then hand the witch to secular authorities for burning. The Malleus created a self-fulfilling system. Torture produces confessions. Confessions prove the threat is real. Real threats justify more torture. The tortured name others to stop the pain. The circle expands endlessly. Modern historians have uncovered the economic engines driving witch hunts. In the German city of Trier, so many people were executed that entire villages had only 1 or 2 women left. But who profited from this slaughter? Witch hunters received payment per conviction. The executioner charged for each burning. Guards were paid to watch the accused. Torturers earned fees for each session. Court scribes charged for recording confessions. The entire legal apparatus fed on witch trials. More significantly, the property of convicted witches was confiscated. In Bamberg, the prince bishop built a witch house with special torture chambers, funded entirely by seized assets. The wealthy were particularly vulnerable. One Bamberg burgher was burned as a witch, and his considerable fortune conveniently enriched the bishopric. The pattern repeated everywhere. In Scotland, accused witches' goods were divided between the crown and local authorities. In France, secular courts competed with church courts for jurisdiction over witch trials because of the profitable confiscations. But beyond official corruption, accusations served local vendettas. Land disputes could be resolved by accusing your neighbor of witchcraft. Unwanted wives could be eliminated. Business competitors destroyed. The accusation itself became a weapon of social warfare. The 1,612 Pendle witch trials in Lancashire illustrate how accusations snowballed. It began with a beggar woman, Alison Device, who cursed a peddler for refusing her pins. The peddler suffered a stroke, probably coincidental, but Alison believed she'd caused it. Under questioning, Alison implicated her grandmother, Elizabeth Southerns, known as Old Demdike. She also accused another old woman, Anne Whittle, called Old Chaddocks. The two families had feuded for years over a broken spinning wheel and stolen property. Old Demdike was 80 years old, blind, and had practiced folk healing for decades. She admitted to having a familiar spirit named Tib, who appeared as a brown dog. Old Chaddocks confessed to selling her soul to a thing like a Christian man 14 years earlier. The confessions seem bizarre until you understand the context. These women lived in desperate poverty. They survived by offering healing services, fortune-telling, and threatening curses for payment. Their witchcraft was their only economic asset in a world that offered elderly poor women no other means of survival. The investigation expanded rapidly Family members were arrested. A meeting at Malkin Tower, probably a family gathering for Good Friday, was reinterpreted as a witch's Sabbath. 9-year-old Janet Device testified against her own mother, sister, and brother. In the end, 10 people were hanged. Old Demdike died in prison. Before trial, the Device and Whittle families were destroyed, and young Janet Device, who sent her family to the gallows, was herself accused of witchcraft 20 years later. England's most notorious witch hunter, Matthew Hopkins, operated from 1644 to 1647. In just 3 years, he was responsible for more executions than the previous century combined. His methods reveal the manufactured nature of witch panics. Hopkins invented new detection techniques. The swimming test, where suspects were thrown in water. If they floated, the pure water rejected their evil, proving guilt. If they sank, they were innocent, but often drowned. He pioneered sleep deprivation, keeping suspects awake for days, until exhaustion produced hallucinations. These visions were recorded as meetings with familiar spirits. He employed prickers, who searched for devil's marks in sensitive spots where Satan had touched. They used retractable needles that appeared to penetrate without drawing blood. Hopkins charged 20 shillings per town, more than most people earned in a month. He claimed to hold a commission from Parliament, though none existed. His book, The Discovery of Witches, became a handbook for aspiring witch hunters. But Hopkins made a fatal error. In 1647, a brave clergyman named John Gawley publicly challenged his methods. Communities began refusing to pay. Hopkins retreated to his home and died soon after, possibly of tuberculosis. Legend says he was subjected to his own swimming test and executed as a witch. The 1,692 Salem witch trials show how accusations could destroy an entire community. It began with 2 girls, 9-year-old Betty Paris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams, suffering mysterious fits. The girls accused Tituba, an enslaved woman from Barbados, of bewitching them. Under torture, Tituba confessed to fantastic stories, flying to Boston on a pole, signing the Devil's Book, seeing other witches' names. Her confession, likely designed to tell interrogators what they wanted to hear, ignited mass hysteria. The accusations spread like plague. Sarah Good, a homeless beggar. Sarah Osborne, who rarely attended church. Rebecca Nurse, a respected elderly woman whose family had land disputes with the accusers' families. The court accepted spectral evidence, testimony that the accused spirit appeared to torment victims. This was unprovable, unfalsifiable, and completely subjective. Yet it sent 20 people to their deaths. The trials revealed deep social fractures. The accusers were largely from Salem Village, a farming community. The accused often came from Salem town, the commercial center. Economic resentment, property disputes, and religious divisions all fueled the accusations. The hysteria ended abruptly when prominent people were accused. When the governor's wife was named as a witch, he suspended the trials. The same evidence that condemned poor women suddenly seemed insufficient for the powerful. The confessions extracted during witch trials reveal more about torture than about witchcraft. The Bamberg witch bishop, Johann Georg II, kept detailed records of his 600 victims. Johannes Junius, the Bamberg burgomaster, smuggled a letter from prison. Innocent have I come into prison, innocent have I been tortured, innocent must I die. He describes the torture sequence. Thumb screws first, blood spurting from his nails. Leg screws next, then the strappado, his shoulders dislocated. After 5 sessions, Junius confessed to attending Sabbaths, renouncing God, and receiving the devil's mark. He named accomplices as the torturer suggested names until he agreed. His letter ends, "Good night, for your father, Johannes Junius, will never see you more." The torture manuals were specific. Start by showing the instruments. Many confessed from fear alone. Strip the accused naked, increasing vulnerability and shame. Begin with lighter tortures, escalating systematically. If the accused fainted, revive them and continue. The strappado was particularly effective. Hands tied behind the back, the victim was hoisted by a rope, shoulders dislocating. Weights added to the feet increased the agony. The victim was dropped suddenly, then jerked to a stop, tearing muscles and ligaments. Midwives faced particular persecution. They possessed knowledge of birth control, abortion, and the female body that threatened male medical authority. The Malleus specifically targets them, claiming they kill infants to offer to the devil. In Cologne, every midwife in the city was eventually executed. The charges were formulaic. They supposedly stuck pins in babies' heads during delivery. They stole placentas for magical purposes. They caused miscarriages through devil pacts. But midwives were essential. They were the only ones who understood childbirth complications. They knew which herbs could ease labor, stop hemorrhaging, or expel a dead fetus. Their elimination created a medical crisis. The professionalization of medicine coincided with witch hunts. Male doctors, university-educated but practically ignorant, replaced traditional healers. Women were banned from medical practice, except as midwives. Then midwifery itself became grounds for suspicion. Alison Balfour, a Scottish midwife, endured extreme torture. Her legs were crushed in the boots, while her husband and son were tortured before her eyes. She confessed to save them, then recanted at her execution, declaring her innocence as the flames rose. While Western Europe burned its wise women, Slavic cultures took a different path. Real women were occasionally accused of malevolent magic, but the response was vastly different. Instead of execution, suspected witches faced social remedies, ritual cleansing, or at worst, exile from the community. Russian court records from the 17th century show accusations of witchcraft, but the outcomes diverge sharply from Western patterns. In 1635, a woman named Agrafena was accused of spoiling crops. The village held a ritual where she walked backward around the fields, undoing her supposed curse. She wasn't burned. She was reintegrated. The Russian Orthodox Church viewed witchcraft differently than Western Christianity. Folk magic was sinful, but not heretical. It was a remnant of paganism, to be corrected through penance, not eliminated through execution. Priests themselves often practiced forms of Christian magic, blessing fields, divining with holy books, creating protective amulets. The concept of the devil's pact, central to Western witch trials, never took root in Slavic consciousness. The devil in Russian folklore was more trickster than supreme evil. He could be outwitted, bargained with, even befriended in tales. Without the absolute evil of Satan, there was no need for absolute persecution of his supposed servants. Village structure also mattered. The Russian mir, or commune, resolved conflicts collectively. Accusations of witchcraft were handled as community problems, not legal crimes. The accused witch was still someone's grandmother, aunt, neighbor. Social bonds prevented the dehumanization necessary for mass murder. In Japan, the boundary-crossing woman took the form of the miko, shrine maidens who mediated between humans and kami spirits. Like European wise women, they possessed dangerous knowledge. Unlike them, they remained respected, even revered. The miko performed ritual dances to invoke divine possession. In trance states, they prophesied, diagnosed spiritual illnesses, and communicated with the dead. They knew which offerings pleased angry spirits, how to purify pollution when danger approached the community. The Heian period saw the rise of the onmyoji, court magicians who practiced onmyodo, the way of yin and yang. While usually male, they worked alongside female mediums, recognizing the necessity of feminine spiritual power. The greatest onmyoji, Abe no Sayame, was said to be born of a fox spirit mother, linking him to feminine supernatural power. When Buddhism arrived in Japan, it didn't demonize existing practices. Instead, it incorporated them. Shinto shrines stood beside Buddhist temples. Miko served both traditions. The concept of skillful means allowed multiple paths to enlightenment, including traditional magic. The witch hunts that devastated Europe never occurred in Japan. Women accused of using fox spirits to possess enemies faced social ostracism, not execution. The boundary between beneficial and harmful magic remained fluid, contextual, negotiable. Across Africa, women maintained spiritual authority through various traditions. The Yoruba Iyalawo, mothers of secrets, guard sacred knowledge and perform essential rituals. They're not witches in the European sense, but wise women whose power is recognized and regulated, not persecuted. The Zulu sangoma, predominantly female healers, undergo intensive training, including symbolic death and rebirth. They learn to interpret dreams, communicate with ancestors, diagnose spiritual imbalances. Their knowledge includes herbalism, psychology, and complex ritual procedures. When European colonizers arrived, they brought witch-hunting ideology, but it never fully took root. African cosmologies maintained space for ambiguous power. Yes, malevolent witchcraft existed and was feared. But beneficial magic was equally real and necessary. The distinction mattered. A woman might be accused of malevolent witchcraft, but the same community would consult female healers for protection. The healer and the witch weren't the same category, even if both used supernatural power. In many African societies, postmenopausal women gain, not lose authority. Free from pollution taboos associated with menstruation, they can handle sacred objects, enter restricted spaces, perform powerful rituals. Age brings wisdom, and wisdom brings respect, not suspicion. Scandinavia presents a unique case. The vulva tradition survived, Christianization in altered form. These seeresses transformed into cunning folk or wise ones, maintaining their practices under Christian veneer. Medieval Icelandic sagas describe volur with remarkable consistency. They carried iron staffs, wore distinctive blue cloaks, traveled between communities. They performed cider, a form of magic involving shape-shifting, prophecy, and weather control. Even after conversion, Scandinavian communities consulted wise women for important decisions. They blessed fishing nets, protected against trolls, found lost objects, and identified thieves. Church records complain about parishioners seeking cunning folk for healing rather than priestly prayer. Sweden experienced witch trials, but later and less intensely than Central Europe. The Great Noise period, from 1668 to 1676, saw executions, but they ended abruptly when child accusers admitted lying. Swedish authorities became skeptical, requiring substantial evidence beyond mere accusation. Norwegian witch trials reveal interesting patterns. Accused witches often claimed to have learned their arts from the Sami people, the indigenous reindeer herders. The Sami maintained shamanic traditions, including female Noedi, who drum journeyed to other worlds. This connection to living tradition may have prevented complete demonization. In Islamic societies, The wise woman archetype evolved differently. The Quran acknowledges magic's existence, but distinguishes between permitted and forbidden practices. Healing with Quranic verses was acceptable. Invoking jinn or devils was not. Traditional healers called hakima practiced medicine based on Greek and Arab texts, combined with folk knowledge. They specialized in women's health, childbirth, and children's diseases. Unlike European midwives, they weren't systematically persecuted. The concept of the evil eye, widespread in Islamic culture, was handled through protective amulets and prayers, not witch hunts. Women might be suspected of casting the evil eye, but the response was ritual protection, not execution. Sufi traditions particularly preserved female spiritual authority. Women saints like Rabia al-Adawiyya achieved recognition as mystics. They weren't boundary crossers in the shamanic sense, but they maintained spaces for female spiritual power outside male religious hierarchy. The Ottoman Empire recorded some witchcraft accusations, but executions were rare. Islamic law required extraordinary evidence for capital punishment. Confession under torture wasn't considered valid. Multiple reliable witnesses had to observe the actual crime, not just its supposed effects. The question remains, why did Europe alone transform the wise woman into the demonic witch? Several factors converged, creating perfect conditions for mass persecution. First, Western Christianity developed a uniquely dualistic worldview. God and Satan were locked in cosmic battle. Every human chose a side. There was no neutral ground, no ambiguous space, no complex morality. This differed from Eastern Orthodoxy's more mystical approach or Asian religion's acceptance of moral complexity. Second, the European legal system evolved from Roman law, emphasizing written codes and formal procedures. Witchcraft became a crimen exceptum, an exceptional crime, where normal legal protections didn't apply. This legalistic approach didn't exist in cultures with customary law traditions. Third, the Reformation shattered religious unity. Catholics and Protestants competed to prove their godliness by destroying evil. Witch hunting demonstrated religious zeal and political control. Both sides burned witches, proving their orthodoxy. Fourth, European economic transformation created unique pressures. The enclosure movement destroyed traditional commons. Peasants lost access to herbs, wild foods, grazing lands. The wise woman's knowledge became less relevant as people moved to cities or became wage laborers. Fifth, the printing press spread. Witch hunting manuals rapidly. The Malleus Maleficarum reached every corner of Europe. Local traditions of tolerance were overwhelmed by standardized persecution methods. Print culture created a unified demonology that transcended regional variation. Europe paid a terrible price for its witch hunts. Historians estimate between 40,000 and 60,000 executions, though some suggest higher numbers. About 80% were women, mostly over 40, often widows or spinsters. But the death toll only hints at the true destruction. Traditional knowledge vanished. Herbal remedies, passed through generations, died with their keepers. Communities lost their midwives, healers, and counselors. The social fabric tore as neighbors accused neighbors. Children betrayed parents. The psychological impact lasted centuries. Women learned to hide knowledge, avoid standing out, conform to narrow roles. The wise crone became the wicked witch in fairy tales. Female power became synonymous with evil. Medical knowledge particularly suffered. Male doctors replaced midwives, but lacked practical experience. Maternal and infant mortality likely increased. Folk remedies that actually worked were forgotten, dismissed as superstition. The social control mechanisms developed for witch hunts persisted long after. Surveillance, denunciation, and ideological conformity became normalized. The witch hunt provided a template for later persecutions, from political purges to ethnic cleansings. Despite persecution, the wise woman archetype survived in Europe through various strategies. Some women became cunning folk, practicing benevolent magic while carefully avoiding anything suggesting devil worship. They rebranded their services. Instead of casting spells, they offered prayers. Instead of magical herbs, they provided simples or household remedies. They carried Bibles, quoted scripture, and credited God for their healing powers. Some traditions went underground, passed secretly, from mother to daughter. Family recipe books contained coded herbal knowledge. Embroidery patterns preserved symbolic meanings. Lullabies carried ancient incantations disguised as nonsense rhymes. The Benandanti of northern Italy, mentioned earlier, show another strategy. They claim to fight witches, not be witches. Their night battles protected crops from evil forces. This good witch versus bad witch narrative provided cover for continued practice. In remote areas, traditions persisted openly. The Scottish Highlands, Welsh Mountains, and Pyrenees valleys maintained wise women into the modern era. Geographic isolation protected ancient practices. The witch trials ended, not from moral awakening, but from practical concerns. Authorities realized that torture produced unreliable confessions. The economic cost of endless trials exceeded their benefits. Enlightenment rationalism made educated elites skeptical of supernatural claims. But the archetype of the boundary woman, the keeper of forbidden knowledge, never truly disappeared. She shape-shifted through the centuries, adapting to new contexts, wearing new masks. Today we see her everywhere, though we rarely recognize her ancient roots. The midwife has become the doula, advocating for natural birth against medical intervention. The herbalist transformed into the naturopath or aromatherapist. The crone's wisdom reappears in the therapist's office, the yoga studio, the meditation retreat. Baba Yaga lives on in stories, no longer teaching children about death's necessity, but still representing the wild feminine power that exists beyond civilization's edges. Modern novels and films reimagine her constantly, sometimes as villain, sometimes as misunderstood hero, but always as power. The European witch has been reclaimed, transformed from symbol of evil to icon of resistance. But something was lost in those flames. The unbroken tradition, the accumulated wisdom, the respected social role. These cannot be fully recovered, only approximated, imagined, reconstructed. Perhaps the deepest lesson from comparing Baba Yaga to the European witch lies in how societies choose to handle ambiguous power. Do we preserve complexity, acknowledging that the same force can heal and harm? Or do we demand simple categories, good versus evil, us versus them, burning what we cannot control? The answer shapes more than folklore. It determines whether wisdom can pass between generations, whether difference is tolerated or destroyed, whether power outside official structures is recognized as necessary or eliminated as threatening. The boundary woman still stands at civilization's edge, holding her ambiguous knowledge. We can acknowledge her complexity, as the Slavs did with Baba Yaga, accepting both danger and wisdom. Or we can light the pyres again, in whatever modern form they might take. The choice, as always, is ours. What will we do with the forbidden power that refuses to disappear? How will we treat those who stand at the boundaries, seeing what others cannot, knowing what others fear? The chicken legs turn, the cauldron bubbles, the wheel of history spins. And somewhere between the forest and the flame, the ancient archetype endures, waiting to see what mask will make her wear in the next chapter of humanity's long story. Share your thoughts below about how these ancient patterns still shape our world today.